In the deserts of South Peru, massive geoglyphs stretch across the landscape, geometric shapes and zoomorphic designs created by an ancient civilization, some of which can only be seen from the sky. When most people hear the word Nazca, these feats of ancient engineering, the Nazca lines, are the first thing that comes to mind. But why is that all we know about the Nazca culture? Surely a culture that could create such incredible feats of engineering must have had other artistic traditions. Let me introduce you to Nazca Pottery. But first, a bit of history. The Andean region, those countries in West South America joined by the Andes mountain range, has a vast pre-Columbian history. When considering just the period in which ancient ceramics were developed, the time known as the Andean ceramic period, go figure, archaeologists delineate even further, defining 6 periods between 1800 BCE and 1534 CE. These are the initial period, early horizon, early intermediate, middle horizon, late intermediate, and late horizon. Now, you've probably heard of the Inca. They emerged as a society during the late horizon, between 1476 and 1534 CE. The Nazca emerged way back in the early intermediate era, between 100 BCE and 600 CE. But for now, we want to look back a little further, to the early horizon, between 900 and 100 BCE. In the same region that the Nazca would one day inhabit, lived the Paracas culture. The Paracas, and later the Nazca, developed in the southern coast of Peru, namely in the Ica and Nazca valleys. While pottery has been discovered in archaeological digs in this region, dating as far back as the initial period, most of what has been uncovered was minimally decorated, with incisions, punctures, and raised bands of clay as the primary forms. Both the Paracas and Nazca made their pots using coils, and unlike their contemporary neighbours, the Moche, there is little evidence that they used moulds to set the shapes of their pots, preferring to work the shape by hand or by using the paddle and anvil method. The Paracas style appeared during the early horizon and brought with it colour through the use of resin paints. These paints were made from sticky saps, like that of the acacia bush, and mixed with mineral pigments to create an array of colours. These paints were vibrant and allowed for detailed decoration, but they were also flaky and impermanent. You see, the designs on Paracas pottery were applied to the ceramics after they'd already been fired. If they were applied before the firing process, the resin would have melted and burnt away. It is currently unknown where in the region the technique of using slip painting was developed, but the technique changed the ceramic game in the region and literally redefined a culture. Slip paints borrowed from the earlier resin paints, in that mineral pigments were selected for their colour, but rather than mixing them with a sticky sap, they were incorporated into a thin clay solution. These new paints could be applied to the surfaces of unfired pottery with more ease than resin paints, allowing for smooth, bold designs. And once fired, the slip-painted designs became a permanent part of the ceramic. Slip paints are still used today in classrooms and pottery studios around the world. They're a simple yet very useful tool for decorating greenware and bisqueware. This new method of decoration was accessible, long-lasting and vibrant, and it is believed to have led to an increase in the use of ceramics for telling stories, to the point that it surpassed the use of textiles as a medium of communication at the time. The revolution in ceramics that slip painting facilitated was so major, in fact, that archaeologists pinpoint its development as the end of the Paracas style and the beginning of the Nazca. That's right, the only thing separating these two cultures with distinct names and historical periods is coloured clay paint. Okay, That's maybe oversimplifying things. In his 2006 book, A Source Book on Nazca Ceramic Iconography, Donald A. Proulx outlines what he considers to be the 9 canons of Nazca ceramic art. Not every piece of Nazca pottery will contain all of these canons, especially those towards the beginning and the end of the Nazca style, but they're a very useful guide for recognizing a Nazca piece. These canons are polychromatic painting. The Nazca were unique amongst the ceramic styles of ancient Peru, as no other group used as varied a palette of colours. This is so notable, in fact, that pieces from the later years of the Nazca style, when influences from neighbouring cultures led to a reduction in colour, have begun to be redefined as not technically Nazca pottery. Layout. Methodical planning went into the layout of most Nazca pottery. The use of registers on taller pieces to separate visual elements, as well as slip-painted bands at the top and bottom of pieces, ensured that the design remained consistent across a piece. Modular width and symmetry. This refers to the Nazca practice of creating registers on the piece that were of equal width, as well as maintaining elements such as eyes or noses along symmetrical bands. Symmetry in faces was also very common, especially those of mythical or religious beings. Outlining. The most notable change from Paracas to Nazca is the practice of outlining that came into use. After colours were applied to a design, a black outline was used to define the shapes further. This had the extra purpose of neatening and sharpening any mistakes made in the colouring process. Alternation of colours. Very often, when a visual element is incorporated into a piece, especially as part of a pattern in a register, they appear in alternating colours. In some pieces, the same design appears on both sides of a vessel in 2 different colours. Perspective. The use of perspective in Nazca pottery was rudimentary but not uncommon. In order to create the idea of perspective, the Nazca would often layer their elements. For example, snakes coiled on top of each other, or limbs crossing over. It would not be until much later, when the Nazca style was in decline, that horizons or inclusions of the landscape would begin to appear. Kennings. A kenning is the replacement of one element with another, often holding symbolic meaning. For example, the tongue of a mythical being turning into a river as it flows from the mouth. The link between trophy heads, blood, and agricultural success can be seen in pieces that link plants with these decapitated heads. Effigy vessels. The Nazca did not only paint polychromatic designs onto standard ceramic forms. Effigy vessels in the shapes of birds, beasts, and of people were also common. This style of vessel was not uncommon in the region, but the Nazca effigy vessels are unique, as they are created within the context of the other 8 canons. Subject matter. The Nazca's designs often featured motifs that fell into one of 2 categories, sacred or profane. The sacred refers to the mystical beings that made up the Nazca religion and mythology, as well as the religious practices related to them. The profane motifs included images of birds, plants, fish, and farmers, the mundanity of everyday life. So all of that is great, but what does that mean for us today as artists and educators? Something I personally find interesting about looking at ancient artistic traditions, such as Nazca pottery, is that the practices that were developed well over 2,000 years ago have stayed with us, relatively unchanged. Coil pots, paddlework, slip painting. All of these came with great cultural shifts for the Paracas and Nazca, and we still use their techniques today. While the development of these techniques occurred all over the world at various points in history, I think that it is still important to convey to students the heritage of the art forms that we are practicing. I also think that when studying any artistic tradition, it is important to remember that no artistic style exists in a bubble. Everything is either a development of or a response to previous artistic styles. While archaeologists separate the Paracas and Nazca styles with the use of strict canons, the people who created these ancient pieces had so much in common. Even our own works are inspired by styles we have enjoyed or disliked. It is important to reflect on how our own artistic vision is influenced by the styles of the past. Thank you for watching.